Welcome to Minukuu tutorials. In this second session of our tutorial on strings, vectors, and data frames, we are going to look at how to convert character strings or variables in general to factors or numeric format and vice versa. Sometimes after, let's say, creating a data frame in R or RStudio, or when we import data set from maybe Excel file or whichever source, or it could be, data imported from a CSV, what do you call it, a SAV file, that is CAV file, it's from SPSS, for instance, or from CSV file, from text file or tab file. When we import this data, sometimes we would realize that some of the variables have not been well imported. Not that they are not well imported, but the class of the variable changes. You could have a numeric variable being recognized as a character variable, and how do we convert it from character to numeric, or how do we convert a character variable to a factor format, and vice versa. So in case you haven't watched the first part of the video or the tutorial, please do not hesitate to look right below this video in the description box. You shall find a video to how to write strings or how to create strings, vectors, and data frames. We've already done that. So in this example, for instance, what did we do? We decided to create a data frame of three columns or three variables, or if you want, three strings. Okay, let's say two strings and an ordinary vector. Okay, two string vectors and a numeric vector. So with the two strings vectors, one of them we call it student, and then student we have concatenated a number of strings, names of students like Ama, Alice, Sandong, and Ali. And then the numeric vector we just created, we just entered the marks of the students. So Ama, for instance, had 70%, Ali had 50%, Sandong had 40%, and Alice, and then Ali had 65%. And we moved on to we created another string vector. Now we call that one, or character vector, that we call assessment, where the pass mark is, let's say, 50. If a student scores below 50, then it means he has failed, or so we've done that. And I said to create a data frame. All that we have to do is what? To come and use the data frame command, and then into brackets you write the name of the student, followed by, that is the object. So you have to first of all execute these ones, or you can enter everything after which you execute. It's the same thing, or run it. So we entered the student, which is the object that stands for our first vector, which is the name of the student, followed by the marks, followed by the assessment, and then we hit comma, or we enter comma, and after which I explained that in the first part of the video that we had to specify how we want R to recognize our strings. In case you don't know what a string is, I've already done that in the first part of the video, but know that a string is simply a character. It could be a single character, that is any letter from A to Z, that is enclosed by, or a group of characters. When we talk of a group of characters, we are talking about words, like Ali is a word, Alice is a word, Sandong is a word, Ama is a word, passed or failed, these are words. So these are characters. And then R, we cannot just write a word and hit enter. It wouldn't work. It will give us an error. R will not be able to recognize any character or any group of characters entered. So we have to usually enclose it in quotations, either single or double quotations. And when we enclose it with quotations, at that point we call it a string. So this is a string, this is a string. However, for numeric data, we don't have to enclose them with quotations. So when reading data into R, or when we are creating a data frame, it's often important to specify whether we want all strings to be recognized as factors, or we want all strings to be recognized or to remain characters. So when we say strings as factors is equal to false, what that means is that R is going to recognize our data set as what? Factors. It is going to recognize all strings as factors. However, not all strings are necessarily factor. As characters. When we say as strings as factors is equal to false, R is going to recognize all data or all strings as characters. By default, like I said, we often call strings as, let's say, as character strings, for instance, unless we convert them into factors. By default, every string is a character, or a character string for that matter. So a factor could be considered as a character string. However, a character string, not all character strings can be considered as what? Factors. For instance, Sandong, Ali, and all these people here, Amma, Alice, they are not factors. Why? Because these are not responses of a categorical variable. Should we go to a different class, the names will change. However, when we talk of a categorical variable, that one, the response, we term them as factors. Why? Because for categorical variables like assessment, it's either the student has passed or failed. So if you go anywhere, it's categorical. It's just like sex. When you talk of sex of a patient, it's either male or female, or maybe transgender. When we talk of marital status, married or not. So this is categorical. And categorical responses of a qualitative variables are termed as factors, whereas non-categorical variables remain simple what? Characters. Okay, without speaking much, now let's execute this once again. I've already executed it, and as you can see, this is our data set, but we'll execute this all once again, and I'll now show you how to do the conversion. So let me execute this. Okay, after executing this, to print our data set, all I have to do is just write print into brackets, then I write the name of our data. We named it as data, or data frame, we named it as data. So I'm going to print data. Okay, so if I should execute this, let's see what happens. I have my data set right here. But now, so let me zoom for you to see in case you haven't seen properly. So this is our data set here, our data frame that we created. And let me show you what we entered. Okay, so this is the first string, which is the name of the student. We concatenated a couple of strings, the names of the students, followed by the numeric variable, which is this, followed by the third factor, what we call the character string, which is what? Simply assessment. So the strings are passed. So this is categorical. You see that it's repeated. Why is it categorical? Because they are repeated. We have, for instance, passed twice. If we could have passed multiple times if we have a very large data set, but every student has just two responses, either pass or fail. So this is categorical. Now that we decided to say strings as factors is equal to false, then what that means is that all these strings will be considered as what? As characters and not factors. So how do we know whether R has actually considered our strings as factors or not? We use the str command, or function. So you write str for structure, into brackets, the name of the object that contains your data frame. So you write data. Okay, now if we should select this and then execute. You see, when I executed, look at in the console, look at the results. R is telling us that student is a character, and that is very true because student here is a character variable. After which is telling us that assessment is also a character because we entered strings. So, and I said when we say strings as factors is equal to false, then it means it will consider all strings as factors. As characters, as simple characters. So assessment is also a character. Then marks is what? It's numeric. So this is perfect. So now let's see But okay, let me zoom once again, explain something to you. As I explained, student, and for the interruption, student as normal circumstance is a true character, but marks is normal, is numeric, but assessment is not a character, it's a factor. That's why we have it repeated here, because every student has to give one of these two responses. So this is categorical with two levels. It's a factor, not a character. But by default, since when we were creating our data frame, we told R to consider all strings, that is all words or characters or group of characters in quotations as characters and not factors. That's why we said factor is equal to false. So it has recognized all strings as characters. However, if we know that assessment is not a character, then how do we change it to factor? So to change assessment to factor, we will use the command that is called the as.factor command. So we will simply use we have to select the variable that we want to convert, sorry, the column or the string that we want to convert. So to select this particular string or variable or column, which is assessment, we usually use the $sign. The name of our data set is is data. So to select assessment within data, we use $assessment. So let's do that. So we enter data $assessment. You see it, and now we will now say it's equal to read. Sorry, so I said read. Sorry for that. We now use the as.factor command since we want to convert assessment into factor. So we as.factor into brackets. We write the name of the. So we've selected this particular variable, the variable that we want to convert, which is assessment, and that's what we are going to convert. So we repeat the same thing. So we write data $assessment. You see it. Now if I should hit enter, or if I should execute, since I'm writing on the script, so if I run this, let's see what happens. When I clicked on run, it hasn't given us any error, so this is perfect. And now if I want to know whether the structure of our data set once again, then I have to select just structure of data set and click on run. When I do that, what happens? You see that R has now given us a new structure of the data set. It's telling us that now in our data frame, R has converted student remains character. However, R has actually converted what? Assessment now to factors, to a factor with two levels, that is failed and passed. Okay, now the question that you'd ask me, what if we had decided to leave our data frame as a factor? So if we had decided to let R to recognize all strings as factors, then this would have been true. And what that means is if I say this is true and I execute this once again, so let's see what happens. If I say this is true, then what that means is that if I should look at the structure of our data set, all strings are going to be considered as what? Factors now. You see it. So, but we also know that student here is not a factor. So how do we convert student back to a factor, to character? So you have a choice when importing your data set. You can consider all strings as factors, after which you can decide to convert those strings that are characters, convert them from factors back to characters, or you could consider all strings as characters, then after which you convert those that are factors to factors. So in our case, we considered all strings as factors this time around, and we want to convert students back to character. How do we do that? We simply use we repeat is the same thing as this. So we want to convert students, so we say data $student is equal to as.character, and then data $student. Okay, so we simply select this. Okay, we select it, and then we click on run. Now when I do this, if I should look at the structure of our data set once again, you realize that right now okay, now if I should look at the data set once again, you realize that only student is now considered as a character, but the other string vector, which is assessment, remains factor. So I hope my explanation is clear, and this is how we convert string vectors from either character to whatever, and in case, from either character to factor or factor to character. Mind you that there are no different, mathematically, there's no any problem in R. Let's say there's no any difficulties manipulating characters or factors. You could treat all strings as factors and it will work perfectly. You could create your contingency table. You could do anything with the data. There's no problem. You could leave all factors as characters. You could also leave all factors or all strings as either factors or all strings as either characters. There's no problem with that. But what is numeric has to be maintained as numeric. Okay, now let's move on. If in case, let's say, sometimes you enter data and then R will recognize, let's say, or let's say, assuming we want to convert a numeric variable into the numeric variable, which is max, we want to convert it into factor or character. It's the same thing. Sometimes, why is this important? For instance, we can import data set and then this is numeric. Let's say max is numeric, but R might recognize this as a character. When we talk of characters, characters could take two forms. Characters could either take the format of, let's say, of strings, or they could also take the format of numeric data. For instance, that's why we talk of, in case of ordinal variables or rank variables. For instance, if you have the marks of students, let's say based on some performances or scores, for instance, let's say based on sports performances, you say, okay, this person, will give him performance, we'll give him, maybe we rate him 10. Sometimes we rate the person 20. So these are our ordinal variables, and these can be treated as qualitative ordinal variables in the form of ranks. And at this point, you could have the numeric data, but at that point it's serving as a character, or as a factor, and not just a, what do we call it, and not just a numeric data. So how do we convert a numeric character, a numeric variable or a numeric vector into a character vector or a string, or a factor? So to do that is very simple. All we have to do is, for instance, assume we want to convert numeric, so we say data $max, for instance. Then we do as usual. We use, by this time around, we'll use as.numeric. So data $max, and then we say, we want to convert max from numeric to a factor, for instance. So we say as.factor. Data $max. Okay, if I should execute this, let's see what happens. It has worked perfectly. Now if I should look at the structure of our data set once again, you realize that max will now be converted to what? Factors, and no longer numeric. And then in case you want to convert max, which is under normal circumstance numeric, back to from factor back to numeric, then you simply use the as.factor command. So all you have to change here is what? Interruption. So all you have to do is to use the as.numeric command. So if I want to convert marks back to numeric format, then I have to clear this and say as.numeric. Okay, and if I should execute this, let me select it. If I should execute, click on run. Okay, now if I should look at the structure of our data set, what happens? Right now we've succeeded in converting our marks back to numeric. Okay, now we've done this on what? A data frame that we created in R. So let's quickly import a data set from a CSV file or any kind of format, and then we try to repeat the same exercise. So these are let me show you in the script. These are the commands that you can use when you want to convert, as.numeric, as.factor. This is how we do the conversion. So let's quickly look at the data set. For instance, assuming we have this data set here, as you can see this in Excel format. So we have the data here. We have the name of the student. We could call this name. This is actually in French. So we have name, mathematics, physics, French, and whatever. So let's assume, and then valid, that has the student pass or not. Okay, so let's assume we want to import this data set. We simply save it as a CSV file. Click on file, click on save as. I will put it on the desktop. Okay, let me put it on the desktop, and I'll call this tutorial. And then what I'll do is that I'll select CSV format here. Where is CSV, command delimited. Okay, that's okay. So let me save it. Say yes. And now we have our CSV file on the desktop. So we have our CSV file on the desktop, which is tutor here, as you can see. So to read this data set from the desktop into R, I simply right click on it, and come and click on properties, and come and click on security, and then right here I have the full file extension or the full file path. Right click on the file, click on properties, click on security, and copy the name of the file or the full file path. Control C to copy. And now, or you can right click on it and click on copy, it's the same thing. So we copy it. Now let's come to our R here. In case, okay, let's read the data into R. So I'll use the data, let's call this one data1. Data1 is equal to, then we use the read.csv. What are the differences between CSV and CSV2? In case your data set is a command delimited file, usually in the Anglophone sector, the English version of Excel gives us a CSV file, but the French version of CSV file is CSV2. So if your Microsoft Excel is in English, when you save your file into your Excel file, it will be a CSV format. If your Excel version is French, then it will give you a CSV2 format. So let's pick, mine is English, so I'll pick CSV Classic, and I'll simply write quotations and paste the file extension here. So we have the full file extension that I copied from the desktop, and all I have to do is simply put here. Okay, because R uses / and not backward slash like Windows. No. So I'll simply read this data into R by selecting the whole of this. Okay, and then just come and click on execute or run. and R has imported the data set. If I should print the data here, so we say print. Okay, so within the console, sorry for that. If I should say print, to print our data set, so I say print. Let's see what happens. Print data. This is our data set right here. So we have name of the student, we have physics, math, and these are the marks. If I want to know how many students are there, I can use the dimension command. So I use dimension into brackets data, and it will tell me how many students we have. So we have 10 students, 10 rows, and 6 columns, or 6 strings of okay, let's say 6 variables or 6 columns. So if I want to know the structure of my data set that we've imported, then I use the str command. Str into brackets data, and this is telling me that name is a character. So it has actually, by default, when you are using the read.csv command, what happens? R considers what do we call it? All strings as factors. By default, let me show you something. But when if you want, write question mark and write read.csv. Okay, and hit enter. When you write question mark and read.csv and hit enter, and you come over here in your R, you come over here and let's see what is there. You realize that when you look at read.csv, look at the, what do we call it? The quote, no, not the quote here. Okay, look at the quote. When you look at this quote here, this quote stands for, when it's this way, it stands for what? When you see the quote as, by default, the quote, that's the quote, that's for the strings. So by default, the strings are quoted in double quotations. So, and any word, so what that means is any word at all will be recognized as a string in double quotations, and by default it will be considered as what? A character. And for instance, any word at all, like for instance, when we are looking at names of the students, so we have names, these are words, so they will be quoted, and for that matter they will become strings, unless probably you have told R to consider strings as factors, which we didn't do. We didn't say. So we have the argument here, which is, I don't know, normally we have the strings as factors argument. It's not given here, but it's there. Under normal circumstances, we have the string as factors argument, which we never set to be true. If you had set the strings as factors argument to be true, then it would have considered all strings as factors. Okay, let me not go into the details. Let's come back. So right now, if I want to know the structure of our data set, I've already done that, and it's telling us that names of students is a character. However, validation, valid, yes or no. So instead of, for validation, for instance, it's categorical. The student has two choices. It's either he has validated or he hasn't validated. But names is actually a character. So if we want to convert a validation to what we call to factor and not a character, then all we have to do is what? To write data $, we select validation, which we want to convert valid, to be equal to as.factor data $valid. And then if I should hit enter, sorry, I made a mistake. I wasn't supposed to, I didn't actually, I'm sorry for that. So data $valid. to be equal to, I didn't put it dash, as.factor interruption. Okay, as.factor data $valid. Okay, so if I should hit enter, see that R hasn't given us any error. And now if I should look at the structure of our data set once again, str into brackets data, you realize that now valid is considered as what? A factor with two levels, no, uwe, yes or no. Either the student has passed or hasn't passed. Thank you so much for watching, and this marks the end of our tutorial on how to convert string, what we call a string vectors, or if you want variables or any kind of variable from, let's say, numeric format to factor format, from factor format to character, or from character to numeric. This is how we do it, how we convert variables from one class to another class in a data frame. And I used these two examples to tell you that a data frame could be data that you import. When you use the read.csv command to read a data into R, the data, or the read.table command, the data is imported in the form of what? A data frame. Or you can also write a data frame on your own by following the example that I showed you here. Thank you so much for watching, and please remember to subscribe. In the next part of our tutorial, we shall look at how to use the quotes argument and also how to use the stringsAsFactors argument properly. So please subscribe and look right below in the description box, and you shall find these tutorials on how to use the quote argument in the read.csv or read.table function, and how to also use the stringsAsFactors arguments. Thank you so much for watching once again, and please subscribe.